Welcome to Mandibil and welcome to the next installment in my deconstruction series on Bernardo Kastrup's series Analytic Idealism course. And we are still in part 4, and last time I had a bit of I got so frustrated trying to both keep my head wrapped around what the hell he's talking about, while at the same time being able to do some constructive and reflective philosophical deconstruction that's not too weird for you as a listener to handle, right? I'm not trying to mostly for myself to handle, I should say, right? I can tell you how you should handle things. Maybe you're much more, geared towards doing this than I am, but but it's just like he has been throwing words at me for several hours, right? Just starting out by saying you have an experience and you can't go beyond that experience, right? And then the next step is he's trying to attempt to explain what is going on beyond experience. And then he starts throwing terms at me like, knowledge and true and whatever, all the things under the sun that is sort of philosophical terms that should have some kind of definition and meaning and sort of in a context shown here that is sort of a use of words that is usually used to describe your experience and not what is beyond experience. And this sort of double meaning, using terms, it's like if you're switching between two languages of which the other language haven't been established yet, right? Then it's very confusing what language you're actually talking, or in the sense that are you talking about that which is the experience and that which is beyond the experience, right? So and then the last part at minute 48 here, he just sort of switches it around, and all of a sudden that inside experience is placed beyond my experience, right? So now I'm completely confused about what the hell he's talking about, right? Maybe I misunderstand what he's trying to say, or he's screwing up what he actually means, and he thinks he presents it, but it's inherently contradictory or something like that. It's sort of all over the place, right? But what I'm really taking away so far is he doesn't define the terms used, which he needs to do when he does, particularly with metaphysics, because of this problem of there's an experiential realm and there's something beyond that I can't experience. And using terms left and right for these two areas is confusing as hell, right? And then there's, as I said, no definitions and no, what's it called, limitations of where the terms are used. If they're used in both areas, you're just bound to confuse everyone, right? Okay, and there's no reduction base. He keeps talking about this important reduction base, but he hasn't presented it yet, right? So if you haven't got a reduction base when you are philosophizing about metaphysics, right? You should be treated as you are deliberately manipulating people into accepting what you are going to tell them later is the reduction base, right? It's like you're talking about a bicycle, but you haven't explained what a bicycle is made of, so to say, right? And you keep talking about this bicycle and you're telling stories about this bicycle, and people have sort of a grasp of what it might be and so on, and you're telling stories and explaining this and explaining that, using a car tire as an example of what might be a bicycle tire, so on, right? Why don't you just say, well, this is the wheels, this is the frame, this is the steer, this is the pedals, this is right? It's like at the same time as he's telling you, well, you can never know what a bicycle is, right? So, I mean, this journey he's gone on is like, I mean, I was sitting last night thinking, he's actually making things worse, right? If he has any ambition on, attempting to make a Copernican switch in metaphysics on a global scale, so to say, right? Then he's only making things worse by doing this, because it sucks. It's unbelievably incoherent and confusing, and it reeks of woo-woo shit, right? Only crazy people are going to follow you, right? Well-functioning, philosophically rigid, and skeptical people are going to say, this guy is fucking dangerous, man. He's trying to manipulate me, right? They'll be, solidifying their materialist approach to things, right? If the alternative is this garbage, then I'm personally on board with materialism. I grant you that immediately, right? Because this is this is a pile. This is a joke. I mean, it's like, does he really believe what he's saying? Does he really believe that he can go beyond his experience and tell me, using his experience and presenting something that is experiential, to explain that which you can't experience? It's madness, right? It's crazy. It's craziness. And, or I might mention that I just received a notification from my ISP, my internet service provider, that there might be some hiccups in the connection in the next, actually 2 weeks. But, intermittently there might be, they're screwing around with the connections or the cables out in the, in the environment somewhere, right? So I might have some hiccups. So I hope we will get through it, right? My local recording software, I'm recording a local file and keeping that and then uploading that to YouTube rather than streaming it, which is sort of, I'm depending on the connection, right? And hoping that the internet connection doesn't drop out for 10 minutes, then I'll be sort of screwed, right? And I'll have to just say, okay, I'm quitting here and take a next step later. So if this ends up being a 12-minute long video, okay, so no problem, right? So let's see how it goes. But another thing, I was, just roaming around YouTube last night, right? And I listened to some music here and there, right? As you guys on the Discord surely knows, we have discussed music a few times, right? And shout out to Einkrav for being really, keeping the discussion going and participating so much in this discussion. I really appreciate it. It's nice. And Einkrav, I have a strong sense he actually understands where I'm coming from and my skeptical approach to everything in philosophy, right? And he also understands the implications of how I argue for this metaphysics, and it's actually potentially the right way to go. I'm not crazy about the right way, because that sounds like you have found the, right? I'm always skeptical about my own conclusions, right? And maybe that's the takeaway in the end. If you're not skeptical, if you reach some point and say, this is how it is, you're sort of wedded to the idea of you being right. It doesn't feel good to, if you are, traveling around the world as Bernardo Kastrup and claiming he's found the only superior solution, and then would have to, after 3 years, bow down and say, I was wrong, right? So there's a psychology in it where you have to, well, at some point, and that goes for Stefan Molyneux also, when you get wedded to your ideas, you are not going to be skeptical about them. That's a problem, right? If you can't change course philosophically, you are a dead end, right? You are potentially a dead end. You might be right, but you don't know you were right before you figure out if you were wrong, right? So if you have this materialist metaphysics, for instance, right? if you're wedded to that, if that seems to you to be the only explanation, you stop looking for other explanations, obviously, right? And then you're not going to find alternative explanations because you're not looking for them anymore. And when other people talk about other solutions, they sound like crackpots, idiots, right? Who just spout whatever they want and bullshit, right? Just like Bernardo Kastrup does. So, as I say, these materialists will be just, is it called the Flynn effect or whatever? It's like they'll be solidified in their belief, right? Rather than convinced that you have something to offer. They're going like, get away from me, like, Dracula waving garlic in your face, right? I mean, it's like... well, getting back to that YouTube last night, there came some suggestions on music, and there apparently somebody has uploaded a 25-year-old live recording with AC/DC, which is one of my old favorites, right? I don't listen to them that often, but now and again when I want that sort of deep, rooty, earthy, simple rock and roll feel, right? Hard rocking, bluesy rock feel, then there's nothing better than AC/DC, right? They get, it's like it grabs your balls and just riffs, from here on, and right? My vocabulary needs to wind up a bit, I suppose, right? But, and I was listening to, it was just these old, my favorite AC/DC album is one called Power Age, back from the Bon Scott days. I think it's from 77 or 78, I'm not really sure, but around that time, right? Power Age is just a brilliant, there's no real big hits on the album, but it's a steadily good album with one, brilliant riff after the other, right? Power Age, I urge you to look it up, right? Power Age is just a brilliant album. It's, in my opinion, it's a class above Back in Black. I don't know why Back in Black has also always been this kind of, big, it's always in the top 5 of the greatest rock albums of all time, right? I don't know why. There are good tracks. Back in Black is a great track, and what is it? Hell's Bells, that's also on there. It's a great track, right? But there's a lot of other tracks I find kind of boring, right? But Power Age, check it out, right? But the takeaway was that they have been doing this simple thing, right? A good riff, a bluesy, pounding rock, just, a good bass, good guitars, good drumming, great drumming. He's a great underrated drummer, that drummer from AC/DC, the original one, I think is called Phil Rudd. Superbly pounding, steady, tight drumming. That's what you want, right? No fillers, no bullshit. Just stick to what works, right? And it's sort of this, I like that approach sometimes, right? Stick to what the fuck works, right? What works? Well, my experiences work, right? I can't tell you why I have my experiences, but they seem to work, right? They seem to work. If I'm experiencing banana, it's potentially something that can make me survive, right? So why wouldn't I use that and philosophize about that rather than try to understand what the hell is behind banana and why I am experiencing banana at the same time that I'm convincing myself I can't go beyond my experiences. That is fucking crazy, right? Just do as AC/DC does, right? Stick to your guns, man. Stick to your riffs. Stick to your blues. Stick to your, steady rock and roll, right? No bullshit. No progressive. No synthesizers. No bullshit. Just, bass and a drum and a guitar. That's all it takes, right? And some good melody, some good riffs. Then, blow the stage, blow the audience, right? It's this elaborate academic rambling is ridiculous, right? And then I also get this, a few times he's done, I have watered this presentation down. You can go read my book, which is called something like Materialism is Baloney. And there's a more academic, difficult description. But you are just one of these peons I have to convince. So I'm watering down and then talking about adventures like once upon a time there was, a little man crawling, whatever, right? Just making stuff up. It's like, well, if I'm criticizing you, you have sort of a get out of jail card where I can say, yeah, but this is just, an everyday presentation. You should go and read my book, right? It's also this, the same attempt or technique that Stefan Molyneux uses when he is willing to go into some argumentation about his ethics or whatever, which is notoriously bad, right? And when people start to criticize him, then, well, you should go read the book and come back with some, quotations, right? And when they do that, then he says, well, you can't use quotes. You have to use the whole book, right? And they say, well, the whole book is understood like that to me. Well, you have to bring quotes. So they're sort of moving the goalpost around, right? And this kind of watered down presentation, which is apparently is according to his own statements, right? If you interpret it this way, is sort of a get out jail card back and say, well, but you actually have to read my book, right? You can't just take this presentation as good philosophy, right? It's just sort of it lurks underneath, right? Okay, let me head into continuing the deconstruction, and let's see. I think I wound back about half a minute or maybe a minute, so just for me to catch up from where we left yesterday.
We see the world. We see the clouds. We see the sky. We see a fence, and we see plants and the rest of the world.
He had made the drawing, but there's the big outside mind, and then there's little dissociated mind, which is his mind, and then this big outside mind impinges on his border or his dissociation from the big mind, and on the other side, on his internal, mind side of dissociated mind, I should say, there's this impinged representation, this projection or whatever it is that is impinged on him, that's handed to him by this outside, which should be colors and shapes and so on. And then he proceeds to place all that experience completely on the outside of that, which is his dissociative part of that mind. So go to minute 48 and 20 seconds thereabout to see the presentation. This is like the crazy train, right? I mean, there's no brakes on this crazy train. What are we talking about now? Your experience is outside your experience, and the outside is the actual experience, and you have, right? I mean, I have to, be in a listening mode here in the next to find some ground where I can start to deconstruct this or keep deconstructing, because now everything is blown out of the water, in my opinion. There's nothing coherent left now, right? Everything just floats in one big pile of definitionless descriptions and a lack of a reduction base I can use to reference what the hell he's talking about, right?
Because it's not useful to have, it's not conducive to survival to have a transparent window into the world. That would be too confusing. We need a sort of virtual reality user interface, and that's what the dashboard of...
Why would you say it would be confusing? I mean, you can't talk about, you can't relate your experience to what it might be outside. All I would say is it's so different. That's the furthest I will go, because it's an experience and not the existence. But it doesn't even make sense to talk about existence, about it outside, right? Because you can't even claim that. You cannot claim anything about it, right? You have an experience, and there's no way to draw any conclusion from that experience what might be out there, right? And in the first place, if it's an experience of something else, right, you need to have an experience of whatever it is in order to have anything to say about it, right? Then it's different from what it is, because it's an experience of it, and you are dissociated from it. That's also why I think it's complete fallacious to say it's of the same kind out there. I'm just dissociated from it. In my opinion, it makes much more sense to say it's something completely different, and that's why I'm dissociated from it, right? It's because it's completely different that I'm dissociated, and because I'm dissociated, I need an experience of it to have anything to do, right? To have anything to hang my hat on, right? So this is I don't know what to say.
Stuff here presents itself to us on the screen of perception. That's the origin of these two perspectives to experience, the intrinsic view and the extrinsic appearance as perceived.
Okay, so he keeps talking about these two perspectives. Well, is it two different entities having two different perspectives? Because then we are talking about extrinsic and extrinsic things, of which there are also two perspectives. That makes four entities, right? You can't have a perspective of something without having something that is having that perspective. And if it's the same thing, there are three different entities. If there are two different perspectives by two different entities, well, then there's four entities, right? You just keep adding stuff that you are not explaining, but you actually have to explain how do you get to it. You can't just use a word and then it's sort of given what you mean, right? This is extremely bad metaphysics, just bringing in terms as you sort of see fit, and then just, I guess I explained it because I used that word, right? It's lazy, bad metaphysics, right?
Perceived from across a dissociative boundary. Now, is this a revolutionary new way of understanding experience and the nature of reality? Of course not. It's as old as it gets. There's nothing older in philosophy. And to make that point, I constructed this little table here. So, look, we can divide the world into essence, what it is in and of itself, its ontological category, its ontological basis, and appearance, which is how the world presents itself to observation. Not what it is in and of itself, but how it presents itself to observation. Now, yours truly, me, calls essence the intrinsic view. You have heard me saying this multiple times today. And the appearance I call simply extrinsic appearance. So the intrinsic view is direct experience. Extrinsic appearance is how inner experience presents itself to observation from across a dissociative boundary. That's my terminology. My colleague, philosopher Tjen, prefers the terms concealed nature and revealed nature. But he means essentially the same, essence and appearance. That's what he's talking about, but using different terms.
So now you're sort of connecting the dots again, right? You're cherry picking. This philosopher says something I can use, so I'm going to list that philosopher. I know that you can't bring all philosophers in, right? But, Swedenborg, wasn't he some kind of mystic idiot, right? Spinoza, he was religious, right? And to some extent also Immanuel Kant, though I have some respect for Immanuel Kant. He has a colleague nobody has heard about, Tjen, who's using other words but basically saying the same. Well, if you're saying the same, why are they using different words then, right? It's just that particular, sophist language, right? Concealed nature, if it's concealed, how? It's concealed, but then stop talking about it, right? But then if you're then saying revealed, what is that which reveals? It's again this notion that you are handed some kind of information You are not handing anything. There's nothing about your experience that says this is how it's supposed to be understood, which is actually implicit what you are saying when you're using these kinds of terms. Revealed nature. Right? It's like, why don't you just stick with Quailian saying there's colors, there's sounds, there's taste? Right? These terms are not imbued with any prior understanding. Right? There is no a priori knowledge of any kind, in my opinion. It's all sophist bullshit to sort of circumvent this otherwise impenetrable, windscreen, right?
That's pointing at the real thing. And the real thing in the metaphor is the actual air pressure. Air pressure doesn't look like a dial.
But you have no dials in your experience. You have colors and you have shapes and you have tastes and smells and so on. There are no dials. There's no way of telling whether or not a particular color refers to anything. You can't even say that it refers. That's just your imagination to say it must refer to something. And then you sort of convince yourself, well, I guess everything is referring to something. And now I'm going to start to fabulate about what it actually is that is referring to, right? It's such an imaginary abstract leap that is completely unfounded in anything. It's unfounded. It's just mental masturbation, in my opinion, right? Yes, we agree that the experience is not the real thing outside if we are working from an axiom that there is an outside, right? And we are using that experience to clarify that outside somehow, in some way or another. But that doesn't mean you can go and fabulate what is outside based on that experience. That's exactly what you can't do, right? Right? You have the experience because you do not have access to the other thing, right? Oh man, right? I guess it's something about I can't accept that there's something I can't explain. I need to go there and explain it, right? That's, it seems to me that people just can't leave it alone, right? I need to go and explain it somehow. I'm somehow deducing, reverse engineering my experience in order to go and say that must be what is out there, right? No, the conclusion I am urging you to stay with is I cannot say anything. In fact, it's completely inaccessible. And I have no way to deducing from my experience of it what it is. Exactly because what I have is merely, I'm not trying to downgrade your experience, but it is something different, which is an experience, not the thing itself. That's why Immanuel Kant is absolutely correct in saying you cannot go there, you should not go there, there's no way of going there, right? As far as I understand Kant.
The dial is a symbol that points at the actual air pressure outside in the metaphor. Now, forget the metaphor now. What Corban is saying is that objects in the physical world, objects and events, are indeed like dials in that.
And this is also, he's not presenting all these dudes reduction base, right? He hasn't pretended a reduction base, as I said. He has not defined words. He's just all sorts of various ways of explaining this and listing 8 different sort of philosophers, apparently. And that's why that's sort of a nail on the head. They're saying, well, there are all these 8 very important philosophers saying the same as me, so you should be convinced, right? It's another sophist trick, right? Well, I have to keep going until we get to that reduction base so I can tear it apart, right? I don't mean it that way, but it's that guy explaining that bicycle to you without describing the bicycle, right? Without referring to specific objects, right? So the reduction base must be that which you use philosophically, right? That's why philosophy and religion has always been opposed, because religion just jumps into that other realm and say, I can tell you about gods and, whatever, right? And, the philosophers are more in line with the scientific approach, which is, no, it has to be based on empirical data, right? But just because materialist worldviews and science seems to go hand in hand, and materialism is a bad kind of metaphysics, it doesn't invalidate, an empiricist approach to knowledge, right? In the end, what you experience what you know must be completely encompassed by what you can experience. If you can't experience it, you cannot possibly know it, right? And knowledge is what we base our everyday decisions on. And in the end, it's also what we are basing our moral judgments about, right? What is going on is what we are saying, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, or whatever, however people, establish their moral judgments. It's always some kind of description of actions and things going on and objects moving around and so on, right? And that's some kind of knowledge. This doesn't help in any way, right? It's just, okay, you're sort of circle jerking your own mind into some weirdo understanding of that which cannot be understood anyway, right? I'm heading in the direction of the everyday. You're going back into some kind of mindfuck where you're conjuring, cooking up whatever you want in order to explain something that doesn't need to be explained, right? Oh, man.
There had to be an impetus for that change. That in essence, the universe had to have an experiential drive towards changing itself, reconfiguring itself.
There's some kind of psychology in this, and there's an analogy to sort of the old capitalism versus communism kind of argumentation, right? When your children grow up to become adults, right? They kind of get through puberty and sort of oftentimes reject their parents' bullshit, way of life, right? And they are usually sort of have become, bourgeois, what you call them, the middle class, sort of, and have their little house and their garden, and they are doing your 9 to 5 and all that, becoming a part of the machine, right? And the children don't understand, because the parents just say, you have to do this because you have to do it, right? So they're saying, that's not a good argument. So capitalism is bad because there's no good argument. Are there any alternatives? Well, communism, right? So communism is the right thing because that's the only alternative, right? So when they're growing up in this, and if it's also connected with some kind of materialism, right? In its many forms, you could maybe say, then people say, well, you're rejecting materialism then. Are there any alternatives? Idealism, right? It's the same kind of three-step, growing up and becoming separate from your parents. So you either eat whatever they say, or you go on the other ditch and say, I'm on the other side. And what's the only alternative there is? It's idealism or communism or something that is, opposing it, right? So I'm taking the other, so I'm also sort of in this trench warfare against the others, right? I'm sort of in that no man's land where nobody wants to be.
And what is that impetus? What's that drive? Well, it's the will. The universe needs to want something in order to go somewhere and do something. If the universe were perfectly content.
Another thing I might add, when I'm writing a book on philosophy, and you could actually call it sort of a treatise on philosophy, but I'm actually going for a moral principle, right? And it's no secret, I believe, that the title of my book, my working title, and it has been that working title for a couple of years now, which is The Perfect Principle, right? So I'm not saying my whatever I come up with is perfect, but that's the ultimate goal, right? And my metaphysics, I'm not mentioning any other philosopher. I'm not, there's no references, there's no quotes, there's nothing. Because if I'm working on metaphysics, I actually cannot bring in other philosophers because they will need to have settled metaphysics before they can start to tell me about their philosophy, right? So if it's settled by these other philosophers, why I'm not just, if I'm accepting those as good philosophy that I can use in my philosophy, then I have to accept all that they state as being their philosophy, their sort of treatise or whatever you want to call it, right? So why am I not just adapting their metaphysics instead of just cherry picking particular words they use, right? I'm just saying, well, if I accept that philosopher, I'm accepting their metaphysics. So I'm going to just say, go read their metaphysics. That's identical to my metaphysics, right? But he uses this sort of in a cherry picking fashion that is actually indicating that he is just outright accepting maybe 8 or 10 different disparate philosophers' metaphysics that cannot possibly be identical, right? And identical to his own. Otherwise, he's saying, yeah, I'm cherry picking that word and that word, bringing it into my own presentation just to give you some kind of notion that there's a lot of us out there with the same opinion about metaphysics, so you should accept it because we are many, right? There's at least 8 of us, right? Sophistry, right? I also find it a bit worrying I find it a bit just without these people there, you're just cherry picking a few words they are particularly mentioned in their somewhere in their philosophy, and you're just solidifying your own philosophy by mentioning these people as sort of a reference without their acknowledgement, right? Are there some kind of copyright infringement here, or you're using them just to your advantage, and you say, this word they're using, it actually the same as my term, right? And that term over there, it could be translated into sort of, these are 10 different formulations of the same, right? And you're just sort of throwing words at it to say, I guess it's the same because I want it to be the same, right? So they can't defend their own metaphysics. You're just forcing them into being the same as your kind of metaphysics, right? That's not really fair, I would say, right? Let them speak for themselves. Don't sort of twist it into your own advantage, which is a bit what I see here, right?
So for Spinoza, the essence of the world, it's ousia, the thing that really has standalone reality, he called substance.
So he's basically saying I must be right in my elaborate description of that which I don't have access to, because these philosophers use some different terms which I sort of can translate into being the same as my terms, right? You see how fluffy this argumentation from metaphysics is, right? This is not pure philosophy. This is just basically throwing stuff at you in the hope that you will be convinced, right? It's not rigid philosophy. It's not, I have this experience, therefore I can jump to this axiom that's stated this way, and therefore I can go to the next axiom, and therefore I can go to this definition, and so on, right? It's just cherry picking whatever, using language, whatever, and sort of making some plausible argumentation for that which he believes to be the case, right?
Modes of expression of nature as it is in itself. Nature as it is in itself is natura naturans. When natura naturans expresses itself in a certain mode, what you get is, modes. And these modes are the correspondences. They are the phenomena. They are representations of natura naturans. They are symbols and icons that point at natura naturans. They are the appearance of natura naturans. And what those appearances are, they are the classical physical world, the world of solid objects spread across space and time, the revealed face of nature, the extrinsic appearance of nature. You see? It all comes together through the history of philosophy. But now I want to make a point that has personal significance for me.
Okay, it all comes
apologies
together.
for the mild digression, but there is an incredibly widespread misunderstanding and misrepresentation of Spinoza. A lot of scientists today who try to be sympathetic to philosophy.
Okay, I think I'll take a break here at 1 hour and 2 minutes, 38 seconds. And I have something I need to do. And it seems like he's going into defending Spinoza in his own presentation on metaphysics. I guess that's fine, but maybe this is a good place to make a break. And, share, subscribe, and like, and join the Discord, link below. Consider a donation, and so on. See you later.